Variables. In plain English, it's really just an adjective meaning changing. In statistics or mathematics, you might see it as a placeholder, the A, B, C, X, Y, Z that we always encounter. Now, what about in programming? A variable is a data type that you use in a programming statement to really store and manipulate data. In other words, para siyang container. Not that container, but siguro pwede na rin. But it's a container for data that we can use in a program. The primary motivations for variables are reusability and readability. So these are the reasons, or the primary motivations, I would say, that why we're using variables. Kung bakit tayo gumagamit ng variables. Reusability because, as we see, that again, we can by its name, is that we can reuse variables over and over again in our program. And readability because it puts it into context of what values we're using. So if you interpret your computer's memory as a grid of cells, then we can essentially look at these variables, as these containers, right? Where we can put values. Again, we're just storing data, we're just storing values in these grid in these cells. Okay, so maybe you can have the value of 12 in here, right? Maybe you can have hello in here, right? Or maybe you can have true in here, right? The value true. And so these variables are just really containers again, and we're giving them names. Okay, so this is maybe A, this is maybe B, this is gonna be maybe logic or whatever. The naming is up to you. Okay, but again, if we're gonna be using these, right? For example, in our code, this is your code, and let's say if you're writing some codes and you're gonna be using some kind of value, let's say 12, instead of hard coding 12 into in your code, what you would be doing is that you would just be putting A, right? So whenever your code encounters this A, right, it's gonna procure the value contained in A, which is going to be 12, right? So now, every time that your code essentially encounters A, this is going to interpret this as 12, right? It's the same thing with B. If your code encounters B, it will interpret that as hello, and if it encounters the name logic, it will interpret that as true. And the reason why this is very useful is that, again, for reusability. Let's say, for example, if you are calculating for some kind of equation, an area equation, right? So length times width. Let's say you have 12 and 4, right? And let's say the values of 12 is going to be the length, which is going to be denoted by L, the variable name L, and let's say 4 is going to be the width, which is denoted by the variable name W. Now, okay, now again, we've defined this area as equal to 12 times 4. But what's going to happen is that if we want to use these values again, let's say for another equation like area 2, right? We want to be this with 12 times 4 times 11. There's a duplication. There's a duplicate here, right? And what's going to happen is that if the parameters of our shape changed, for example, we now have a different parameter, let's say 6 and 2, you would be changing this with 6 and 2, 6 and 2. You would be erasing these and putting this 6 and 2, right? So that is a little bit cumbersome. And now you see this hard coding values into our code is quite laborious or inefficient. Hindi siya magandang practice. Okay, so a better way to actually do that is using variables. So instead of writing 12 times 4, you would be writing L, right? And times W, right? This is just the same thing as with mathematics, right? You are assigning these numbers to some name, right? So L times W. And the same thing in here, like L times W times some kind of, another variable C, let's say, constant C. So now if this changes, if L and W change, or if the parameters of the shape that you're going to be using is going to change, let's say, for example, that now the shape that is in question, or is if the subject matter is going to be having a length of 3 and the width of 6, then you will just change these values. Okay, now this is going to be 3 and this is going to be 6, and again this would be whenever your computer or your code encounters these variable names L, this will interpret this as 3, and same thing with W, this will interpret this as 6. Okay, and the same thing in here, because we're using variables, you don't need to put in 3 and 6 and change the variables again, and change the values again. This would already reference 3 and 6. Okay, so you only had to change the one place in your code, and everything that is referring to that to those values will be changed automatically, will be interpreted by your code as these values in here, 3 and 6. So that is reusability. Another primary motivation of reusing variables is the readability of the code, or the maintainability of the code, right? So naming is a very important factor, or is a very important aspect of variables, okay? So kailangan natin magbigay ng meaningful names para dun sa variables natin. So let's say, for example, if you say just, again, just A, B plus C. Does this actually make any sense to you? Like, it's just A is equal to B plus C. Those variables can stand for anything, just like in mathematics, right? This can be, this can be mass, right? This can be gravity, right? But you get the point. For someone who doesn't know your code, probably you, it makes sense for you. Kasi sinulat mo yung code na yan eh. You're the one who wrote the code. So if you look at it, okay, this is what I'm doing, and I expect that the number would be this. But for someone who doesn't know what you're doing, this would just really be A is equal to B plus C. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know what A is supposed to mean. Like, I don't know what B is supposed to mean. C, I don't know what it's doing. But let's say, for example, so this is an incorrect way of essentially naming. You can name it like that, but it's not that readable. Is it readable for you? Like, for example, for you, I don't know if you can read this, but let's say, like, area of circle, right? Underscore circle. You already know from the onset that this is a variable, right? And this variable should contain the area of a circle, right? You already know that it's going to be the area of a circle. Now, let's say this is going to be pi times the radius, right, squared. And you already know this is going to be, for you already know pi, constant 3.14, right? And you already know, then you're also gonna know the radius, because what we're talking about is we're putting into context the objects that we're using, the values that we're using in this equation. And if you multiply these together, you're gonna expect that you're gonna get the area of a circle, right? But let's say if you just put in like 3.14 times some random number, like, let's say 3.14 times 16 squared. Like 3.14, yeah, you already know that we're also going to be like, again, the output is going to be the area of a circle. But for someone who doesn't know, actually the equation for an area of a circle, this is just going to be a random number, right? Who knows if this is pi or some kind of other constant that that is important to calculate for the area of a circle. No one really knows. It's the same thing with 16. Is this a constant? Can this change? Is this the radius? Is this some kind of other factor that we're using? We don't know, again, because we're not naming. And this is, again, also, this is not reusable as well, as we've discussed earlier, because we're hard coding values of 3.14, right? And 16, we're hard coding values. So let's say if you used this, if you want to use this radius once again in another equation, you would need to put in 16 again. And if that radius essentially changes, then for every instance or for every reference that you put in for that value, you would need to change that value. All right. So again, that is going to be not best practice. So now that you know the primary motivations of using variables, let's now look at it in code. All right. So now we're going to look at it in code. For this, we're going to be using Python, which is a very beginner-friendly programming language. All right. So in Python, you just declare a variable by using an identifier. Okay. So it's going to be an identifier and then the value. Okay. Or an identifier is just really going to be the variable name, right? So variable name, right? And in here, let's say, for example, that, right, your name, we want to be able to put in like name is equal to John, right? Then if we print name, what's happening is that we are creating the variable name, and this is the assignment operator, right? And we are putting in the value John into name, all right? Again, we're storing the value John into name, and then we're printing the name to the terminal, right? Or to the console. So if we did this, we can see here, the output is going to be John, all right? Again, let's go back to the yung ginawa natin kanina. Okay, so let's say construct an area of, let's say, 10 and then times 20. Right? So if you think about this, right, and then let's print the area. So 10 times 20 is going to be 200, right? So the area, again, right, we don't know. In this case, we're essentially assigning the value of 10 and 20, these hard-coded values, into variable area, and then we're printing the area. If we print this, is going to be 200, right? This is just going to be 200. Now, what if I have another area, right? Area 2 is equal to 10 times 20, right? And then we're going to print area 2. So this is now going to be, if we print this again, this is going to be 200 and 200, right? We're assigning these the calculation 10 times 20 into this area 2. Now, again, if we change the parameters of the shape that we're essentially looking at, this is going to be, let's say that we want to change this into 5, and then we're going to change this into 10. Now, we gotta do that sa lahat ng ginamit natin, that 10 and 20. Okay, that uses those values. Okay, so this is going to be 5, and then now we're going to use this with 10. And let's say if you're using that for a lot of equations, you're gonna papalitan mo yun sa lahat ng equation na ginagamit mo. So you can see why this is not gonna cut it. But let's say if we declare like a variable length, which is equal to 5, and the width is equal to 10, right? Papalitan natin to lahat, right? So length times width now, right? And this is going to also be length times width, length times width, right? So area 1, area 2, and area 3 are all going to be, if we know, that's going to be 50. Now, the good thing here is that, let's say, we want to change the parameters of the shape again. Now this is going to be 30, and this is 400, say, or let's just say 50, right? Now, you do not have to change anything in these three three equations. Dito ka lang magpapalit ng values, 30 and 50. And every time again, when the code encounters this length, it will interpret this as 30. Whenever your code encounters this identifier with, this will interpret this as 50. And if you run this, you will get 1500. So you can see that dito lang tayo nag-update ng values. We didn't update anything in here because we're already using variables, right? So, and the same thing, like let's say for example, rectangle, right? It's good to use very much like meaningful names so that it's readable, because like for example, I already know that this is going to be the length times width, but if you input like, I don't know, 3.14 times 20, I don't know what 3.14 means. That might be the pi, or that just a normal 3.14 constant. Maybe 20 maybe means something, maybe it means the gravity, I don't know. We already know that we're going to expect the area of a rectangle, right? So it's better to use the length times width so that we're in context. Alam natin kung ano ginagawa ng equation na yun. Okay? And we already expect that whatever is in here is going to be the area of a rectangle. We can essentially calculate the area of a rectangle by using its length and the width, right? And now I want to also discuss data types. And the data types are just really data types just really define, you know, the nature of the variable, or what kind of variable that we're dealing with, and the set of operations that we can utilize to manipulate those variables. Okay, so there are fundamental data types, you know, in every programming language. Okay, so let's say for first is going to be the int, right? The int is just going to be a number, right? An integer, right? A number, right? That is an int. So let's say yung kanina ginamit natin, the length and the width is going to be an integer, but let's say it can also be, you know, temperature, right? It can be -20, right? That is also an int, right? That is an integer. You know, the meters would be also an integer, +10. It can be negative. It can be range from you know, from the negative to the positive numbers. Well, actually, that is a definition of an integer. It's going to be the negative and positive integers, as well as 0, of course. It includes 0. And then we also have the float, right, which is going to be a decimal number, right? So instead of, let's say pi, right? So pi is just going to be 3.14, right? And pi is just really going to be the decimal number. So instead of, kung ginamit natin to as an integer, right, this is going to be just 3, right? But since we're using float, we can define it to be as a 3.14, right? Another is going to be string, which is going to be just text, right? Kanina ginamit natin is John, right? Name is going to be a string. John is a string, okay? And this can be anything actually, like hello is equal to hello world, right? That is a string, hello world. And there's also chars, right? Which are just really single characters. So A, say A. That's just really it. Just yung mga nakikita natin sa keyboard, it's just, those are single characters. Those are chars, okay? Then you also have booleans, right? Boolean values, which are just really values, true or false, okay? So, is raining? Let's say, umuulan ba? True, right? Is it sunny? You know, it's going to be false. So we can use these Boolean variables as, you know, for logical operations. So kapag umuulan, then don't go outside. Kapag maaraw, then, you know, bring an umbrella. So that's pretty much it. Again, as recap, you know, the data types are just going to be the int, the float, the string, the char, and the Boolean. An int is just really an integer, a number, right? It's going to be a negative or positive number, which includes 0. A float is just a decimal point number, 3.14. A string is just text. A char is just going to be a single character, And a Boolean is going to be true or false, 0 or 1. That's going to be a Boolean value. Now you know the basics of variables. But if you think about it, we're also like computers with a bunch of variables in it. You know, the insiders are a collection of beliefs, and just like a variable, you're not bound by a current state. Today you might feel happy, tomorrow maybe you're sad, and next week maybe you're motivated, and that's okay. You know, your values can shift, and life just happens constantly. You know, you update your mood. And why is this? This is because growth requires flexibility. In life, we often cling to, what is familiar. We hold on to roles, we hold on to identities and beliefs as if they define us. But really, the truth is, you're not the same person you were a year ago or even yesterday. We're constantly taking in experiences and new knowledge that shape who we are. We are meant to change, to adapt, to grow. The sooner we accept this, the sooner we can free ourselves, from the fear of the unknown. Yes, discomfort is the price of change, but it's inevitable. There's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is really be comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's where all growth in life lies. We grow by stepping outside of a comfort zone and accepting that things must change, just like variables. And remember, the only constant in life is change, as Heraclitus once said. Hello, Puts here. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, consider following and subscribing. So that's it, and I'm gonna do something else now. So, I don't know. Bye, I guess.